So, if you grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s like I did, there's a good chance you're a fan of real time strategy games. And for me, my RTS love affair started here, the original Command and Conquer.
Moving out.
Reinforcements have arrived.
Acknowledge.
I was already really into history and military stuff when I first played Command and Conquer, so it was so cool to take control of an army and command them in battle in real time. When I had enough of that, I of course could just switch on over to Warcraft 2 and then I could defend Azeroth against the Orcish Horde. There were so many great games from this time, from Dune 2 through Age of Empires, StarCraft, Total War, so on. It's hard to keep track. For me, these games scratched an itch somewhere deep in my psyche, and they still have a place in my heart to this day. There are a lot of different parts of the overall formula that made them great, from resource management, to base building, to tactically commanding your soldiers. The success or failure of the mission was dependent on me and my ability to plan and react better than my computer opponent. They also tended to have compelling stories that pulled me in even more. As much as I love them, and I do, there's one thing that always bothered me. None of my soldiers have any sense of self-preservation. Seriously, if you ask a minigunner to attack a tank, they just happily set off to their doom without a moment of hesitation. Sure, boss, I'll go attack this armored vehicle spraying all my friends down with napalm. You got it. Like, shouldn't a footman, when faced with certain death at the hands of the two-headed pile of muscle and violence that is the ogre, a monstrosity he's never before laid eyes on in his ever-shortening life, just nope right out of there? Enter the Close Combat series. Now, these were World War II games where you took command of a platoon of soldiers organized into squads. You issue orders to your squads like move, sneak, fire, defend, or ambush, and they do their best to carry out those orders. Crucially, the game tracked the condition and the mental state of each individual soldier in each squad, and it turns out they didn't have the same penchant for getting themselves killed as the soldiers in other games. When they came under fire, they would hit the deck, crawl for cover before returning fire if they could. If their squad mates were cut down before them, they might break or retreat. Suddenly I had to worry about moving with covering fire and using the terrain to set up ambushes, because the morale and well-being of soldiers mattered, both mine and the enemy's. I also needed to be sensible. When I asked my rifle squad to attack a tank, they very rationally reply, "We can't hurt that," and then they just go and disregard my order. As much of a revelation as Close Combat was, I did miss the base building and the resource management. The great logistical chain that powered your army was not your concern, which worked fine for that series, but for 20 years I wondered what it would be like to put together all the pieces and how that might work. Managing soldiers with their own psychology on the battlefield is one thing, but how does that translate to when you're back at base and you're building buildings and doing the non-combat stuff? This is where RimWorld, everyone's favorite war crime simulator, comes in. You have these flawed colonists, survivors of a spaceship crash on a sparsely settled planet, building a base and satisfying their Sims-like needs in order to keep them alive and happy. Along the way, the game's AI storyteller will throw events at you that you need to react to. Your own colonists will react as their mood fluctuates with the state of their surroundings. You give them jobs, but they manage their own time, eating when they're hungry, sleeping when they're tired, working when they can. If they get sick or injured, they go to a hospital bed until they recover. Each pawn has social bonds, and they will get angry with colleagues, they'll fall in love, and they'll grieve when they lose friends. It took me a while to figure out that these were the missing pieces of the puzzle I'd been working on in my subconscious over the years, and made me realize that maintaining your fighting force and looking after their needs could make the base building and the downtime between missions more meaningful. You're not building a barracks because that's where you train your soldiers. You're building one because the soldiers you have now need somewhere to sleep and to bond. With all that said, hi there, I'm Jarrett, full-time software engineering manager and hobbyist game developer. This is the first devlog for my latest passion project, Forward Operations. The goal of the game is to add the psychology element into the RTS formula so that your soldiers feel more alive, and to make base building and resource management about supporting the soldiers you have. You're tasked with establishing and commanding a forward operating base, or FOB, in a destabilized country, taking it from bedrolls and sandbags to a formidable fort, and completing missions given to you by high command that you launch from your FOB. Your soldiers' performance in the field will be influenced by how well they're cared for in your FOB. Morale is the name of the game. You want your soldiers to have the highest morale possible. The player needs to organize their soldiers into squads, arm them with the appropriate equipment for the job, and make sure they all come home in one piece. The loss of a soldier can be devastating for morale. Now, all of that would be a tall order for a studio to complete, and as I said, I'm a hobbyist game developer, so it feels pretty unlikely I might finish. I'm pretty good at setting reasonable goals and then chipping away at things, but honestly, this is my most ambitious project yet. That's part of why I thought I might start producing these devlogs, to put my progress out there, get feedback, and maybe get encouragement to continue. I tend to work in quarters, meaning I will get some goals for things I like to complete over about 3 months. When those 3 months are over, I tag whatever I've completed as the next minor version and plan out the next 3 months of work, keeping my calendar and my obligations in mind. Well, since I started working on forward operations in October, and it's now the end of December as I record this, I guess that's a wrap on version 0.1.0. So what have I been up to? There are essentially 4 things I was trying to get done with this first sprint. The first is action planning, since the pawns will need to react to the world around them. I've been interested in building out my own goal-oriented action planning, or GOAP, system for a while, so here was a chance. I spent a good few weeks researching and looking through articles, videos, and libraries. I don't recommend building something like this from scratch if you're a beginner, and I've linked to Crash Conine's free library in the description below, so I think it looks solid and I honestly used it for inspiration myself. It took me some time to wrap my head around GOAP, but the concepts aren't too difficult. First, the pawn will loop through their goals and find the one with the highest priority. Then it will evaluate all of its available actions to find the ones that are possible. It recursively repeats evaluating actions until it finds a plan that satisfies the goal. I need to add a depth limit, but that's a future problem. Once the pawn has a plan to achieve its goal, it executes each action in order. And each action basically is its own mini state machine. For now, the only goal I've implemented is to eat food when hungry, and the only actions that I've implemented are to obtain food if you don't have any, and to eat food from inventory. It's not a lot yet, but it is decent enough for a foundation. The second thing I wanted to do was provide some tools so I could see what was going on with pawns and I can interact with the game world. To do this, I first had to build out an input and a selection system, but thanks to those, I can select pawns and see their condition at the bottom left, which is helpful for knowing if the pawn is choosing the right goal or executing the correct plan. Additionally, at the top right is this button that opens a menu for dev actions that I can take. This is handy when I'm in the editor, and it's a necessity when I'm in a build. This screen just renders a table of all the dev actions that I've created and added to the list. When I select one, it becomes active, and when I click in the game world, the action will run depending on what I clicked on. For now, I can change the pawn's hunger level and spawn food packets. The third thing I added was a system for managing time. Since pawns experience time differently from the player, I run most of the game's logic on a constant tick rate. For now, it's set to 5 ticks every second. This means the hunger will update on each tick instead of every frame. I achieved this with coroutine since that was simplest. Every time a coroutine completes, it waits until the next tick to run again. Since I'm using coroutines, I can control the tick rate with time.timescale. If I set that to 2, the tick rate doubles because the coroutines think that time has increased twice as much. This has the added benefit of changing the speed of animations and nav mesh movement as well, so that's a plus. To pause the game, I just set the timescale to 0. The last thing I implemented was a basic camera system. I'd already built out a basic input management system, so I leveraged that to bind some keys to control the camera. Honestly, Cinemachine does most of the heavy lifting, and it adds some nice smoothing. I just set up a virtual camera to look at a target game object. When I move that game object, the camera follows it. When I rotate it, the camera rotates as well. For zoom, I just manually changed the camera's offset with a clamp to keep it in range. Feels like a bit of a hack to me, but it does work for now. I'll probably revisit it in the future. In any event, that's it for this first minor version. I realize it's not a lot to show, but I do feel like I've laid down a solid foundation for future work. Thank you so much for watching. I'm not perfect. I'm always looking for opportunities to improve, so if you have any thoughts, please feel free to leave a comment below. If you're curious about the game and want to follow future progress, I'd be happy to have you as a subscriber here at Damage Algebra. Teaching is by far my favorite part of my day job, So if you're interested in deep dives on any of the systems I've built or how I like to build things, please let me know below and I'll do my best to schedule that into my next 3 months worth of work. That's all for now. Thanks again. Take care, and I hope to see you at the next one.